Jackson is also here. And if there are any questions that are happening in the chat, she'll help me figure that out. So feel free to type questions in the chat if I'm presenting. Yeah, and we'll go from there. But I should probably tell you who I am. So my name is Anthony Bodlovic. I am currently a faculty at Loyola Marymount in the Marital and Family Therapy with specialization in art therapy program. I'm also currently the program director. And so today we're just going to go over the program a little bit, what you might expect if you are interested in applying and get in, and also just some sort of requirements and things to apply. So we've already sort of closed our applications for fall 2023, but fall 2024 is, right around the corner. So this is just some information. And then if there's anything in particular that you need at the end, you can ask questions. And if it's very specific, we might just set up a one-on-one meeting. But if you think it's applicable to everyone, ask away. All right. So make sure if you do not know what art therapy is or Loyola, you might be in the wrong space. But, who knows, might be serendipitous. So maybe just enjoy and you might learn something. So I'm going to start with a classic PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get to the, all right. Oh, well, we're already getting right to the admissions. Let me get to the top of here first. Okay. See if I can see some of you in the window. All right, here we go. So as I said, my name is Anthony. You are here for the Marital and Family Therapy with specialization art therapy open house info session at LMU. Done. So one of the things I like to start with is that we are in the College of Communication and Fine Arts, which I think is very important to indicate the centrality of the art in this process. So we are in the same college with the Fine Arts program because we emphasize art in all of our courses. So some art therapy programs have art therapy courses and therapy courses or MFT courses. We really combine them all together. So we're having conversations between the two modalities and disciplines throughout all the courses. So there aren't art therapy courses, there aren't therapy courses, they're all integrated. And so the centrality of the art is really important. The dean of our college is Brian Keith Alexander, who is a firm believer and advocate for this program. So we're very lucky to have him advocating for us. The program was founded by Helen B. Langgarden, who was really interested in using art therapy not just as supplemental to therapy, but actually using art therapy as a primary modality through which therapy is conducted. So she was really interested in kind of clinical art therapy. And so her vision sort of blossomed under many other leaders into our program today. So just wanted to make reference to Helen, who passed away. So what is art therapy? Here's a very integrated definition by the American Art Therapy Association. And it just is a lot of things. It's an integrated mental health and human service profession that enriches the lives of people through art making, creative process, applied psychological theory, and human experience. And when facilitated by professional art therapists, they can support personal and relational treatment goals, as well as community concerns. It can improve cognitive and sensory motor functions, foster self-esteem and self-awareness, cultivate emotional resilience, promote insight, enhance social skills, reduce and resolve conflicts and distress, and advance societal and ecological change. It's a lot that we can do. But a 9-year-old client said it's time to draw what's on my mind. So a lot of times when I tell people I'm an art therapist, they assume I work with children or sort of older populations. And I currently work with couples when we're doing couples counseling. So it is sort of a swath of individuals who can benefit from the creative process. So you might be in here thinking about a particular population you want to work with, but seeing the expansive definition before, interest in advocacy, ecology, working with various populations, the creative process, I think, is essential. It is a component of us as humans. And if we are creative or creators, we can negotiate our lives and the lives of people around us. So it puts our clients in a position of being a creator and active participant in that process. So I think it's applicable to a large variety of populations and people. Okay. Not that I have to sell you on art therapy. I think you're here with some interest in it already, but So our program itself. So we integrate art therapy with family systems oriented informed psychodynamic perspective. Well, what does that mean? Well, it just means that, like I said, we integrate art therapy and creative process in systems thinking. So thinking about not just an individual, but the systems in which they reside in, whether those are familial systems, societal systems, systems of oppression. So really kind of contextualizing a person within the systems in which they are living. We embrace a multicultural focus throughout the curriculum. So it's an emphasis in a lot of our coursework. We are approved by the American Art Therapy Association and by the Board of Behavioral Sciences because there are the Marital Family Therapy, which is a degree that leads to a licensure that allows you to practice as a primary clinician in the state of California. It is a state-specific license. That does not mean that the license can't be transferred to other states, but it's a process. So different states have different rules. So California law is something you'll have to understand as it applies to marital family therapists. What are our legal obligations to our clients? That might look slightly different with New York law. So if you were going to go to New York, you'd have to really understand what their requirements are, maybe take additional courses or transfer the license. So it is a state-specific license. So it's important if you are interested in practicing in another state or in another state and want to go back there to really understand what that would look like to transfer that license or that degree. And the Board of Behavioral Sciences sort of oversees the marital and family therapy component. The American Art Therapy Association, well, it's a registration that you are also, when you complete, primed to be able to apply for registration. And the American Art Therapy Association oversees that. And that is sort of a registration that is national. And you can, in some states, recognize an art therapist as a primary clinician. In California, art therapists are not recognized currently as primary clinicians. So you need a Master of Social Work or counseling LPCC or an MFT usually, or clinical psychology to be a practicing clinician. So that's why we have the MFT component, but also the art, but we integrate it. I just want to be clear. I don't know if there are any questions about that because it is a huge component. I don't know, Dr. Jackson, any questions in the chat? I'm assuming no. Okay, so let us move forward. Now we are going to enter into the suite virtually. So this is where I am currently. I'm not behind a tower or in front of a tower. I am in my office in this suite. And so you'll see the Helen B. Lingard Art Therapy Clinic on the door. We'll talk about the clinic and the various things that our program does. But as you sort of walk in here, we're going to kind of virtually go through what you might expect, what the schedule might look like. So, or first who you might meet actually. So we have Dr. Luvinia Jackson, who is the department chair and an associate professor. So Dr. Jackson really grounds our department in the theories of cultural humility, bringing her extensive research with communities, and she wrote the book on it, bringing cultural humility to art therapy. So her research and her guidance really helped the program become a lot more thoughtful and given a philosophy through which we can sort of look at our courses and also our own actions to be accountable to our students, to be accountable to the field. And so then there's me, who is here. I really ground myself as a practicing artist. So what I really think about myself as an artist and how my art identity really enhances my art therapy identity. And I'm really interested in how, as art therapists, we can continue our practices as artists, as advocates, and looking at art itself as research. I also work with Dr. Jackson often, collaborating on the courses we've designed together, and both been trained in the cultural humility model. So the interactions between our faculty, I think one of the highlights of our program. We have a very small faculty, but it allows for a lot of connection and a lot of interesting projects. All of our faculty are very active. It's not like someone who's practiced therapy with Freud years ago and is like telling you things. It's very active in the community and actively participating in research. And Dr. Jackson's a leader currently leader in the field. We have Dr. Jessica Bianchi, who comes with a real interest in education and how art therapy can be used to enhance educational systems and also other kind of community-based spaces. And Dr. Bianchi is currently the head of the clinic. So we have an in-department clinic where we provide services to the community. And it is the first kind of practice space for our students. It's a place our students can practice therapy. Even though it says the clinic on the door, the clinic really goes to where it's needed. And so Dr. Bianchi oversees the clinic currently. Dr. Joyce Green has a doctorate in international psychology. He's done a lot of research in other parts of the world. Is currently leading our research institute. We also have a research institute here, and is overseeing our international program, which we'll talk more about later. And our newest addition, Dr. Maru Serikio Joyner, also has a degree in international psychology and is coming as a clinical professor who is currently working with populations and bringing her perspective into the classroom as someone who's in a private practice and has also just completed her dissertation work. So we're excited to have Maru joining as well. But the glue that sort of holds us together, Kathleen Fogel-Richmond and Lori Gloyd. Kathleen Fogel-Richmond is our practicum coordinator. So when I use the word practicum, what I mean is that is where you will do an internship, basically. So you will, your practicum is the site where you practice therapy while a student. So the mental health centers that you'll be placed in are called your practicums. And we have a coordinator who oversees that process for you. Other MFT programs will give you a list of approved sites, approved mental health spaces, and you have to kind of compete with all the other MFTs that are unleashed at that time to try to get the position you want. Kathleen has formed partnerships with many sites throughout LA and even San Diego to try to meet our students' needs that hold spots for our students, which means that you're not competing for a spot with other people. You're just assessing for fit. So you'll have an interview, but they hold the spot for you. So Kathleen will interview you and talk to you about your interests, location, and things you'd like to learn. We have 2 practicums, so 2 experiences of providing therapy while you're in the program. Like I said, the first is usually through our clinic. The second one is in other parts of the greater Los Angeles and San Diego area. Sometimes even further, Kathleen is we had people commute from various spaces. And so it's really a tremendous resource and I think one of the selling points of our program, just to be able to have that quality experience. And then Lori Gloyd, who is our senior administrative coordinator, who sort of helps all these projects and experiences, research institutes, clinics, practicums, and our courses really run. So this is sort of the team. Okay, next. So we have 2 options. There is a 2-year option or a 3-year option. Now, the 3-year we sometimes refer to as part-time, but it's not quite part-time, and I'll explain. But you can either finish the program in 2 years or you can finish in 3. So I'm going to sort of walk through a little bit about what the courses might look like. Okay, so when you start your first year, your first semester, you will be in courses 3 days a week if you are on the 2-year track. And so you open Tuesday with an art therapy studio. So really understanding how to start thinking about art materials in a different way, how to think of them as clinical interventions and the clinical properties of art. And you're being introduced to mental health services. So you understand sort of how does mental health work here in California? What are some things you might encounter? How to prepare yourself for working within those systems. Then on Wednesday, you learn a little bit about art therapy, the research and the literature related to art therapy specifically. And you're learning about the fundamentals of marital family systems, which is an important component of it's the theories and the ideas that surround the approach. So there's multiple approaches as an MFT you can use. There's multiple theoretical orientations you can have. So we cover those. And then we start thinking about how to work with children and the developmental needs of children and how art therapy and those theories can be used to kind of understand and help working with kids. On Thursday, you will have psychopathology and psychopharmacology. So we will be often working with psychologists and psychiatrists. We are not prescribing, we cannot prescribe medication, that's for psychiatrists. We also can't do many psychological tests, those are for psychologists, though there are some tests we can be trained to perform. But it's important to understand how to interpret tests and understand medications and how they might affect our clients. So that's what you'll learn in psychopathology and psychopharmacology, as well as psychological tests and art therapy assessment. And then Thursdays, you also learn a little bit about group dynamics, because that often is a time, it's often the first sort of setting you might practice in, being in a group, maybe with a co-facilitator, to how do you do kind of thinking about group therapy and the objectives of that. So it's a lot. So students in the first semester kind of feel overwhelmed with the amount of courses because there's so much learning happening, but a lot of our learning is integrated into personal experience and art making. So though there might be some quizzes and tests, a lot of it are reflections, art making, papers. We're really trying to have you integrate this experience, not like study all night with flashcards and then forget everything the next day. So, you know, even though learning can feel like we've kind of been trained sometimes like learning is painful, it really is about like letting yourself do the reading and be present. It's a lot of work, but what I think the biggest barrier is just allowing yourself to not be a perfectionist, but be like present and open. And then, you know, and I think some people get nervous, like, I don't think I'm learning anything. And then by the end, they're like, I think I know a lot. So it can be an intense first semester. Don't worry, you've made it through. But one of the things we want to highlight is the field work that we do in a lot of the different courses. So kind of going into different spaces. So we have gone in child psychotherapy to Dolores Mission to kind of observe children in their natural habitat and learning how to have those kind of interfaces in these kind of contextualized ways in classrooms to understand how to develop that rapport or have conversations or elicit art making. And so we try in our courses and keep expanding the opportunities to engage with different people and populations while in the courses. So as part of the coursework. Okay. Whew. This is actually a picture of me when I was a student. That's how we need to update these photos. And also, I don't know why I dyed my hair black, but here we go. So in the second semester, you are now on classes 2 days a week, but you start your practicum. So remember I mentioned the practicum is just where you do your field practice. So you'll be doing 16 hours of field work during the week that you will kind of arrange with the practicum. A lot of that is moving through our clinic, and our clinic tends to have school-based or other places where you're working. But Tuesdays, those children have grown, now they're adolescents, and you're kind of learning to work and think about adolescent theory and working with adolescent populations. You're continuing to build off of the introduction to systems in marital family therapy with more theories, as well as now seeing more observation and thinking about what MFT 680 really is thinking about the new things that are happening in our field. So telehealth after the quarantine is such a huge such a huge way that people bridged barriers of access, but also created barriers of access. But we're learning, like, how does one do telehealth and art therapy over telehealth, if that is something that is appropriate for you and the client. So, and then other great contemporary kind of concerns. So it's kind of a class that kind of looks at what's going on currently in the field and helps you sort of meet that. 612 is a companion to your practicum. It helps you really break down some of those beginning, middle, and end stage ideas of practicing. How do you start a session? How do you assess? How do you close? How do you terminate? Which I think is a hard word, but terminate means ending your therapeutic relationship. It's not quite a soft word, but we want to have a soft experience with it. And then another important part of our program is that you will complete a final research paper. And you start kind of thinking about what research looks like in the Introduction to Research course. And we have a new course that we just started, which is Art-Based Exploration in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Clinical Treatment, which is really thinking about art therapists and our role in society as activists in diversity, equity, and inclusion, what that looks like. And then you're doing your practicum. So there's a lot of great stuff. And we'll be moving forward. I'm going to pause in a minute after we get here. But so traditionally, and again, these opportunities change over time. But one of the things that we would do is go to juvenile hall in the adolescent course to meet with incarcerated adolescents in the juvenile justice system. Now, one of the things you might have coming in, and what Kathleen will kind of talk to you about, is are there populations you feel nervous or anxious working with? And I do find that sometimes people name a population they're anxious working with, and then once they start working the population are like, oh, they're just like people. So one of the anxieties that students had is going into juvenile hall and feeling really apprehensive. So one of our faculty who was kind of spearheading this project took a poll, like, how apprehensive are you in going to juvenile hall? And you can see the anxiety kind of peaking in the middle. And then after juvenile hall, how nervous were they? Like, it completely went down. So being really open to expanding what you think are your own limitations. I think it's good to be reflective and mindful, but hopefully in the program, you'll be open to possibilities you didn't even think about. So we try to provide as many opportunities of engagement through courses, through your practicums, but also other opportunities the faculty does as well that you can be a part of. We also do a lot of work on campus with different departments or populations, with the freshmen, with undergraduate students, that you have the opportunity to volunteer and be a part of, just to give yourself a wide variety of experience. Okay, now, first year, second semester? Oh yeah, so this is the practicum. So again, it's 16 hours per week. It's mostly short-term models, maybe a lot of group. You're just kind of learning how to be in the space, how to sort of start that therapeutic relationship, how to have those conversations and take what you kind of learned and apply it to actual practice. This is another thing that I think is great about our program. Some people feel like, oh no, it's too soon to get into the field, I'm really nervous. But it's really the way that the clinic and the faculty support and all the supervisors, it actually is really nice to start putting those theoretical ideas into application. So it has a place to sit and you can clearly understand it. So I think it's great that in the second semester, you start kind of putting yourself in that work. So there's a video that I can link to in the chat that if we have time, we can go back, but it pretty much is available on our website, where Kathleen goes over some of what the practicum kind of looks like and some experiences with the students. You can hear them talk about theirs. So if we have time, I'll go back and we can watch it, or I'll send you the link. Okay. The other thing is because it is a lot of units, we do have a summer session, but our summer sessions, we have a pretty long summer break. So we're done around May and we start the end of August. So a lot of the summer sessions are done, there's 2 summer sessions and they're done by the end of July usually. So you still have like a month off, and the second summer session is optional. So the first summer session is drug, alcohol, and addiction recovery and aging and long-term care. These are required for you to be able to be eligible for your licensure. And so they're often hybrid models where a lot of it is online or asynchronous learning, but that's going to be during the summer. So it's important to note those dates. And then the second summer session is optional. And this is where we go to San Miguel de Allende to work with art therapists who from an art therapy institute in Mexico City, and kind of take classes together and then do field work in and around San Miguel. So Ana Laura Trevino is sort of our partner and liaison in this project, who is an art therapist that works in Mexico City. And so it's a really amazing opportunity to think about how therapy looks in different spaces and places, to talk about issues of diversity, equity, and really having these broader conversations, and then working again in the field work. Now, we try to make this as kind of accessible as possible. So the units you're taking here are actually units you'll have to take anyway. We just kind of took some units out of other courses that if you go here, you're not paying for more units. The magic and math of that you don't have to worry about, but just know that you're not paying extra units. But you will have to pay for part of it is like the travel and airfare and all that. But we do try to figure out ways to make it as convenient as possible. And this is optional. It's a great opportunity to work in other places. So you might be tired from all that summer or energized. And you are now finishing your, can you believe it? You're almost done. It's your second year. And so you've already had some field experience. You've maybe gone to Mexico. You've got a lot of things under your belt. And now you're only here on Tuesdays. So you're only here one day a week. And the rest of the time you're at your practicum. This is your second practicum, which is a different space. Some of you might continue in the clinic in a different capacity, but a lot of you will be working in different mental health agencies and spaces for 20 hours a week. You work that out with your practicum site, depending on their hours, your availability, and you're pretty much here all day on Tuesday. We are covering cultural considerations in marital family therapy, really going more in depth into systems that are systems of oppression, systems of like thinking that are affecting our work and our clients and ourselves. We have marital family therapy clinical studies going, again, continuing to enrich the theoretical understandings of marital family therapy, and research methodology. So now you're starting your research project. Your second year, you're going to be really focusing on your research project. And a lot of times you're doing that in groups. So you're in research teams with faculty-led research. So that way, those of you who have particular skills, some of you might be great at writing, some of you may be great at researching. So everyone we know has a different experience. And so you can choose different research projects that fit your needs. Often there's an art-based one or a clinical investigation. But the faculty are doing some really great research, and we found that it was stronger to have you work with faculty as a team. And a lot of that then has turned into published articles after the fact, but it gives you a sense of how to do research in that way. So the second year, again, practicum is now the full year. So this practicum goes for the full 2 semesters, and you're doing more long-term treatment models. So you're kind of now really thinking about, how do I continue to work with clients through the beginning, middle, and often end of therapy. So there, as I mentioned before, this is even just needs to be updated because there's many dots here. Maybe some have even gone away, but there are many different sites in which Kathleen has partnered with, making sure that we feel like our students are getting the clinical training and the supervision that we would like them to have, as well as being convenient for students. So, and we'll update this too, because I know Kathleen has added a lot more since. All right. And then you're almost done, just the last semester. Again, just Tuesdays. Really assessment and intervention of interpartner violence, abuse assessment, reporting and training, human sexuality, couples and adult psychotherapy, professional ethics, and then your research. And often the research you're just kind of meeting as needed or meeting at different times, because now you've kind of got the research underway. So you're kind of meeting in your groups, and that can be kind of determined. And you're continuing your practicum. So here you're finishing your research project. You're really now understanding how more to work with couples and kind of taking everything you've applied. And really, you have to take 2 exams for your MFT. One of them you take shortly after graduating, which is an ethics and law exam. So the final class is really, it's not only to help you think about the laws and ethics now that you've been practicing more, because you get a lot of law and ethics early as well, but it's really to help you prep for that exam too. So a lot of times we'll use exam questions from test guides to help you sort of like think about how to prepare for this test. So that way, when you graduate, you feel prepared to take it. And yeah, and then you've graduated. Now, if you're in the 3-year program, what really happens is, and I'll go back to this model, what really happens is in the first year, let me go explain, and then I'll go back to that. Well, we're going back in time. So if you remember, you're in classes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the first year. If you're in the 3-year track, you do not go to Thursday classes. You're only here Tuesday and Wednesday. So then those Thursday classes that you don't take, then you don't take this Thursday either, they become a whole other semester for you. So I'll explain. So if you see, the first semester, you're just Tuesday and Wednesday. The second is just Tuesday. And then the third semester, you're just doing your Thursdays and you start your practicum in that second semester. So it's kind of just taking one of the days out of and making a whole other year out of those. And but the last year looks the same, because you have to be in practicum a certain amount of hours and you're only there on Tuesdays. So for some people, it's not quite as smooth, because you're like, okay, I feel a little more nicely paced, and then you kind of maybe feel a little less like, oh, what am I doing this on Thursdays only? And then you're kind of back in it the third. So just be aware The other thing, you're starting with the second cohort. You start with one group of people if you're on the 3-year track, and then you will then meet another group of people on those Thursday classes and graduate with them. So it's kind of nice for some people. You make more connections, and if you don't like your first cohort, you have a second chance. The other thing is, if you are, depending on how big the group is, there will be people going with you. So there might be a group of 3 or 4, or sometimes more, sometimes 8 3-year students. We tend to not have as many 3-year as 2-year students. So some years we have just a few, some years we have more, and you will go with that same cohort of 3 to however, you will meet and sit with a larger class of 20 somethings, not age-wise, 20 plus people in the group, but you'll not be graduating with the people you start with. So there's pros, and we can talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of that. Okay, so any questions right now in the chat that were related to the sort of sequence of programming? Other questions related to admissions or other things I can answer at that time. But is there anything in? I'm going to check the chat. Okay, okay. Seems like nothing related right now to the program itself, but if there's any questions related to any of the classes or structure of the classes, feel free to ask. If not, I'll move on. How long are class days? Oh, they can be long. So on Tuesdays, students start at 8 and we are done at 3 for your second year. But that's about, you usually are starting around 8 or 9 in the morning and ending in the afternoon. Sometimes like in some semesters, you're ending around 5 or 6, and sometimes you're ending around 3 or 4. So they're really full days. So if you're thinking about work, and it's like it's just a full day, like a full work day. Okay. Now, so as I mentioned before, there's a lot of amazing things at the Helen B. Lingard Art Therapy Clinic. Here's Helen cutting the ribbon for the clinic. Behind that door is not a clinic. It's actually a little library for you to use. But because the clinic is more of a place that we go, so the suite is where we will meet to discuss and you'll have supervision, but we go to where it's needed. So school-based veteran centers, wherever we are partnering, that's where we go to provide the service. And it is a practicum site for our students, which was really great and helpful because when the quarantine happened and a lot of agencies shut down, our students were able to continue practicing through our own clinic. And we found creative ways to practice through telehealth to make sure our students got their hours to be able to finish their degree. So it's really nice to have this ability to create connections and create programs. And some of these programs actually were suggested by students. And so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of have an input in this field and in this department too. Okay. And postgraduate, we've had opportunities for people who wanted to continue kind of connecting to the clinic to be able to have a research or a clinical fellowship to kind of continue to be a participant in the clinic through fellowships upon graduation. The other thing we have is a research institute. We actually have a journal that is an open journal. So it's not behind a paywall. It's a journal of clinical art therapy. We're kind of launching another issue of that is Dr. Joyce Green is overseeing. So really being interested in helping our students support our students if they're interested in research. We have AdArc, which is an alumni collective. So if you graduate and you're interested in research, you can come to AdArc and you'll meet with faculty to talk about how to help support your research. It might be through the clinic, it might be through our research class where you might lead a cluster, or it might be something you do independently that you get support and help with. So we do want to continue to support you afterwards because a lot of it's really ripe for research. And we would like those who are interested to support them. We also have an annual research symposium where we have leaders in the field or adjacent fields come and talk about what's going on in art therapy. And it's usually coupled with an art show as well. So, okay, there's a lot of other things we do. So it's, again, faculty is so active that every week we have a different announcement of a different opportunity and community project to do, but those are two of the sort of consistent ones. Now I'll segue into admissions. What do you need to apply? And this is, again, all available on our website. And yes, so you need to have art requirements. So you have 18 semester or 27 quarter-hour credits. Now, if you have studied in an institution that is maybe not an accredited university, like you were taking classes under an artist or were in some other kind of uh, studio experience, you can count those hours. They don't have to be from an accredited institution, but we do have to have somebody on letterhead to tell us how many hours in the studio you were and what kind of work you were doing there. So the kind of work you were doing, it's the idea of like being under someone's tutelage or guidance, whether it is like an artist or whether it was a university. So there's some flexibility there. The prerequisites for psychology have to be from accredited institutions. And we want everyone to start with the same sort of base because you just need a bachelor's. It doesn't really, we're not asking for you to have a bachelor's in psychology. You can have a bachelor's in anything, but we do want you to have sort of all taken some foundational courses. So that way we can all start with the same kind of base knowledge. And so that requires 12 semester credits or 18 quarter credits of psychology. Of those, you have to have a developmental, which is either child, adolescent, or lifespan, and an abnormal. And they have to be taken within the last 5 years. If they were not, then you have to submit them to the program director for review, and we might approve them. Things we just don't want outdated theories or ideas to be sort of your base knowledge. But there are sometimes courses that you're like, this was cutting edge, it was ahead of its time. And you're over here in that 6-year mark, you can submit a review and say, can you review this course to see if it satisfies that requirement? If it's within 5 years, you don't have to do that. You just submit it. And this is, again, a lot of people take these at community colleges or like online. So as long as it's accredited, and if you're unsure, you can ask us. Okay. The next thing. So again, the next thing you need is a bachelor's and from an accredited university. And again, we're coming from all sorts of backgrounds, which is lovely. Some people have bachelor's in all sorts of things. And but having these prerequisites doesn't really matter what your bachelor's is in, as long as you have one. Now we're recommending testing. So we're no longer requiring the GRE. However, some people feel, because part of your admissions portfolio is you're trying to let us know who you are. And your grades might have been not great because maybe when you were in college for your BA, like you were focusing on other things in life, other things were happening or you were having challenges, and it doesn't really reflect the sort of dedication or aptitude you have for a master's program. So often some people take the GRE to say, this is another way to supplement my kind of portfolio or my transcripts, to say, hey, maybe my grades weren't so great, but here's my GRE score. Your autobiography is another way to contextualize that as well. So if your grades aren't so great in your bachelor's, you can explain with your autobiography like what was going on at that time. So all of these are opportunities for you to tell a story about you. And so we offer many opportunities to do that. So testing is just one way. If you want to say, hey, I'd like to evidence this sort of aptitude, then that's a way to do it. We also know testing is not the only way to do it. And there's biases in tests. So we want to make sure there's ample opportunity for you to show us who you are. We also want to make sure that you are, though, prepared to be able to engage in the discussions and coursework and things like that. So we ask for 2 letters of recommendation. And people ask like, well, who? And that really depends on you. And what you're trying, again, what story you're trying to tell about who you are and who can speak to those aspects of yourself you want to make sure you can highlight. Volunteer experience is great because one of the things we want to make sure when we're assessing candidacy is, do you know what this work really is? Or do you have a sense of what this is, either through personal therapy or volunteering in some way? We know you can't practice as clinicians unless you have some other certification that you're coming in with. But so we sometimes look for that, or if you had instructors in the courses, you want to talk about your, ability to participate in classes or the kind of work you do. So it's really up to you to kind of build that story. And your autobiography is another way to tell that. And you're really emphasizing the events in your life that brought you to want to apply. Right. So, I mean, at 10 to 12, like who can tell whose story until to 12? So you're really picking those pivotal moments that let us understand like why this makes sense for you. And then the other thing you're going to do is an online interview, but it's really mostly you answering questions to a camera. So there's like 4 questions we'll have you answer. So you'll be prompted when you're doing your online application to record yourself answering some questions. You'll have an ability to record it again if you got nervous or didn't really like what you said, but it's just you answering some questions. So because we get a lot of candidates and we're a small department, it's a way for us to kind of see you a little bit and get to know you before we go to the more in-person interview or the Zoom interview where we're live. And then there's a prerequisite checklist, which is just you let us know, like, these are the courses I think are counting for my prerequisites. My bachelor's happening here. You do not need to have all of this completed by the time you apply. I'll repeat, you do not have to have this all completed by the time you apply. The prerequisite checklist is a place where you can tell us your plan. Say like, look, I don't have my psych requirements, but here's my plan. I'm planning on enrolling in this community college to take these. I'm doing this one here, and I shall be done by August 2024. Right, so you just have to have a plan, and the prerequisite checklist lets us know your plan. If you have no prerequisites and no bachelor's and no plan, we might be like, I don't know how you're going to do this, but you might. I don't know. So the prerequisite checklist is an opportunity to let us know. So you do not have to have it all completed. But one of the things that you do have to have in are the autobiography, the letters of rec. But the prerequisites such as the psych, the art, or the bachelor's, those can be pending. So some people are applying while they're still finishing their degree. All right. So again, how do you do this? You go to the online application and just start your application. We're under the College of Communication and Fine Arts, which is important to remember because there are other sort of psychological based degrees in other colleges here. We are masters in marital family with specialization in art therapy. And it's important because the letters of rec are going to be really sent directly, so you don't have to upload them. You just have to have the email of your recommenders and have that ready to go and say, hey, you're going to get an email prompt that's going to have you input your letter for me through an online application process. Yeah. Oh, the other thing I just forgot to mention is your portfolio. How could I forget? So you're going to submit art, which is up to 10 images, and you're going to kind of be able to talk about one. We look for a variety of materials, really lovely. We're not necessarily assessing like the quality, like, oh, look at how realistic that hand is. It's more about showing that you have worked with different materials is lovely, because your client, you might love sculpture, but your clients might want to work in something else. So we want to show that you're open to using other media. We also want, when you're talking about your piece, we want to see your emotional, personal, or psychological or conceptual connection to it. So having like really beautiful, like still life of fruit might look really great. But if you just say like it's a still life of fruit, we're like, well, but we want to be able to talk about this in a psychological way. So if you say, well, let me tell you, this is not just a fruit bowl. The grapes are my mom, the pears my dad, they're battling in this fruit bowl. The bowl represents like Pasadena, whatever. Like your way of talking about your relationship to the art is kind of what we're looking, because that's going to be the skill you're going to need as an art therapist, to be able to pull the metaphors and meaning of the client's work to help them sort of think about, reflect, and change some of the dynamics of their life. So pick pieces that have personal meaning, even if it just like is a stick figure. If you can talk about it in that way, it's going to be more meaningful to us than like a very beautiful piece that maybe is aesthetically great, but doesn't really have that depth of meaning for you. Okay. Next, so we're going to have a virtual group interview as well. So that usually happens in February. So this is way down the line, but we'll let you know to be available. So that's where you'll meet in as a group. So there's 2 phases to the admission process. Once you turn in your application and press submit, there's a second callback you might get. So not everyone makes it to the group interview. So sometimes we have to make determinations, and then the individuals that we interview in this process are in the second phase. And then after this, usually in the beginning of March, you'll find out if you've been accepted or not. The group interview we've been doing via Zoom. It feels like it's been helpful for international or students in other parts of the United States. And it is kind of group art making. We'll have you have some materials ready. We'll ask you some questions. You'll all make art, talk about art. We'll just see how everyone works together in a group dynamic. And then the admissions committee will rate, review, and determine a cohort of usually about 20 to 25 individuals. All right. Financial aid. This tuition rate is probably going to go up. It is not an inexpensive program, but again, you get a lot of benefit in the small classes, the small cohort, the program coordinator, the art therapy component. There's a lot that you get, but there are, if you're interested, here are some financial aid. We do have some departmental awards. It's not a lot, but there's also scholarships available through CAMT and ADA. So CAMT is the California Association of Marital Family Therapists, and ADA is the American Art Therapy Association. And we also have graduate assistantships, which are jobs that you can apply for. Oftentimes for graduate students, they might get jobs as TAing the undergrads in the same department, but we don't have undergrads in art therapy. So we actually have spots in the art department where you can help art teachers in their courses or doing work for them. So you can have assistantships there. So most people apply just through FAFSA, and there are and have been, but this is the hard thing to say, depending on the economy and the political sphere. There are often loan forgiveness programs for people who work within community mental health, who can have their loans forgiven if they dedicate an X amount of years. There's also a lot of our students have kind of disproportionately won a lot of like statewide scholarships as well. Kathleen will also help you write applications when you're applying for these sort of like after graduation scholarships. So campus support, again, it's a small campus, but I think that is a wonderful opportunity to, again, one second, I just unplugged my computer. I don't want to disappear from you while we're almost at the end. Okay. And so LMU, we are kind of in it looks like a kind of a mall. It used to be the Howard Hughes sort of like business center, because LMU is in a community, like really nestled in a community, like of a neighborhood that we're sort of we're in what's called University Hall, which is a little further from campus, but walkable. But on campus, it's really a lot of opportunities for our students to get involved, whether it's student affairs division or there's a graduate association. We have our own art therapy student association as well. So there's a lot of opportunities on campus that we will encourage you to be a part of and participate in, including the Academic Resource Center for individuals who maybe need a refresher or kind of some help on like writing or studying or how to read, for graduate school. And what else? Okay, oopsies. Oopsies, okay, it's been a long day. Next, we have these are some organizations that you should maybe jot down or know. So if you're interested a little bit more about art therapy, we have the Southern California chapter. They'll kind of have other events that are going on that might be interesting to you, and opportunities sometimes for scholarships or just kind of knowing what's going on in the field. And then the California Association of Marital and Family Therapy, because again, we have a licensure in MFT and a registration in art therapy. So we have to kind of know what's going on in both of those worlds. Okay, you can also, oh, never mind. So employment, can you get a job? So we try not to actually kick on more candidates than we feel like we can employ. So we don't want to have like 100 students and then not be able to have people get jobs. So right now, after 6 months post-graduation, we polled the graduate class of 2022, and 88% of them have named that they're employed. 5% named they're not looking. And some didn't respond, but out of the ones that did respond, this is it. So, and this is 6 months out. Some people take a break and then get employed, but we have a pretty good, like when we follow up, it usually is that most of our students seek employment, and those that don't, sometimes it's because of life circumstances. They've decided they have to care for somebody, or they've determined another path. But we make sure also to work with practicums that have traditionally hired our students. Sometimes you don't want to work there. I was hired when I was a student here. I was hired at my second practicum site. So after work or after school, I had a job. I didn't have to apply, which was nice. It's not always the case. It's not always the right fit. There's always not a position available. But we do make sure that when you graduate, we're constantly sending you job updates. And we will get people who specifically ask us to seek our alumni. So before the job gets maybe posted wide, we will have that. And so you can sign up for that as an alumni to keep getting job notifications. So that way you can see what's out there and we can help you get that employment. You can also follow us on LMU Art Therapy on the Instagrams. So if you're interested in seeing kind of what's going on, what's happening in the department at different times. Now, did pretty good. Okay. Now, just a reminder, you got some links for some student resource sessions. So this is also helpful if you're interested in financial aid. Please go at 6 o'clock. And the graduate students of LMU, understanding more about grad life and how to connect to other grad programs. We have a yoga studies grad program. It's also kind of fun and near us. do some work with them too. And then if you have questions about international admission and what that means for you. So I'm going to stop sharing this so I can see you all. And what a relief. I can see your faces again more full. And if there are any questions from the chat, Dr. Jackson, that you can help me sort through, I'm happy to move through.
I think you answered most.
Okay.
Thank you, Leticia, for answering that specific question and giving some links for other resources.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you know?
And, maybe we should stop the recording at this point?
Yeah, that'd be great. So anyway, thank you if you're watching.